This man first ripped his partner's pants off, then he plucked out a small piece of flesh with a razor blade. After observing it for a few seconds, he eased the meat into his mouth. The nausea was so strong that he didn't dare to chew it and swallowed it raw. Then his companions stepped forward around him. They ate it just like he did. If they didn't, this place would be their grave. A month ago, this rugby team was about to play a cross-country match. They were laughing and talking about post-game revelry, but they didn't know the danger they were about to face. As the plane entered the clouds, it suddenly tips higher and higher. By the time the captains realized what was happening, the mountains were already in sight. They pushed the stick, but it's too late. The plane crashed straight into the mountain. The tail broke off in an instant. The passengers, who were in the last seat, flew straight out. After another impact, the wing broke off. At this point, all the people could do was pray. They said their last goodbyes to their families, and then the broken fuselage carried them along until it hit the thick snow and stopped. But the sheer inertia of the plane sent them all crashing into the ground. Another man was killed instantly. After a few moments, the survivors are waking up. They got up to check on the situation and tried to help the injured. Rob opened the cockpit and saw that two of the captains had been killed. He tried to radio for help, but no matter how he tried, there was no response. Then he went to the rear of the plane and explained the situation to the captain. It was getting dark. It's going to get down to 30 below zero by nightfall. They need to find a way to stay warm or they'll freeze to death. Then the captain realized that the seat covers could be used as blankets, so he organized them to dismantle them. As night falls, they huddled together, but the wind and the snow were blowing and they were shivering, so the captain mobilized them to build a wall with their suitcases. They were barely able to keep out the biting wind. Then the team found Randall unconscious in the corner, but they didn't give up on Randall. They used their body heat to help him through the crisis. The next day, they carried their fallen companion out into the snow and said a brief goodbye. And the captain gathered all the food together. He told the 26 survivors, food is the key to their survival until help arrives. From now on, it would be distributed according to a plan. Each man was allowed only one small cookie and one sip of wine a day. He also had the idea of getting drinking water by placing snow on iron plates in the sun. Soon the cold nights return. The bodies on the ground are already covered with snow and ice. They remain close to each other for warmth. Despair was written on everyone's face. They didn't know when the rescue team would arrive. Luckily, Randall woke up the next day. That was the first good thing that happened to them since the crash. Suddenly, they ran out of the plane like crazy. They were waving as hard as they could for the plane to see them. And then the plane bobbed a little bit, as if in response. The people saw it and hugged each other excitedly, celebrating their rescue. Even at night, some were so excited they couldn't sleep. They thought that if they were going to get out of this hellhole tomorrow, there was no need to plan for food, so they ate their fill. The next day, the crowd waited early, but they didn't see the rescue team until darkness fell. It was time to eat. The captain was furious when he opened the box, because the captain thought the rescue team might come by land. It would take them a week to cross the mountains, but they didn't think so. The man next to him asked a question. If the rescue team saw them, why didn't they drop food? When they heard that, they realized the magnitude of the problem. But now all they could do was wait. It was the 5th day since the crash. They suddenly found a radio. The captain rushed to get on the line, only to be met with desperate news. The rescue team had never found them, but they have very little food left. They have to find a way to save themselves. Rob thought that there should be a battery in the back of the radio, so they could use the radio to contact the outside world. So they set off immediately, but they didn't know the danger under the snow. The man with the glasses suddenly stepped on the ground and fell into the snow. Luckily, they pulled him back before he fell into the abyss. Afterwards, they sat down on a rock away from the snow to recover. Due to the long period of time without food, their bodies couldn't cope with the snowy mountain. And then someone suddenly made a joke. You know what Randall said? He said if he gets too weak, he's gonna eat one of the pilots. Rob was stunned. He'd never thought of eating human flesh. Afterwards, they rushed back to the wreckage before it got dark. For the rest of the day, they prayed day and night. During the day, they waited in the snow for the plane. At night, they snuggled up to each other to keep warm, and the days of hunger and cold made their condition worse. And that wasn't the worst of it. The next day, the captain heard desperate news on the radio. The rescue team thought they were all dead and would stop searching immediately. The captain was devastated by this news. He had no desire to lead them out of their predicament. To his surprise, Randall stepped forward. He immediately told them the good news in the face of the crowd's skepticism. Randall said that without a rescue, so they could focus on saving themselves. And then Randall said, we have to eat to survive. They all looked at each other in disbelief. They all knew it, but they just didn't want to accept it. We're gonna eat dead bodies. We don't have a choice. At this point, there was a lot of debate. Some would rather starve to death than abandon their humanity. They believe that people have souls, but Rob says that when you die, your soul leaves your body. It's just a pile of meat lying out there. When they heard that, they stopped talking. Finally, they made up their minds and went outside to look at the bodies in the snow, but no one dared to make a move. At that moment, Rob stepped forward. He was defeated by hunger. If they didn't eat, They would all die here. Rob cut off a piece of flesh with a shard of glass. After hesitating, he slowly put the meat into his mouth. He swallowed it with fear in his heart. Seeing that someone had taken the lead, they all walked towards the corpse. They ate like Rob. After all, no one wants to die. After eating, the team looking for the tail of the plane set off again. They followed the direction of the plane's crash. They didn't return to the cabin until dark. After the night, they almost froze to death. Luckily, the sun came up and the temperature rose. That's how they survived. Soon they found the detached seats and their dead companions, but they didn't see the tail of the plane, so they decided to go back to the cabin to report it. They didn't have any warm clothes. Meanwhile, a bunch of other people thought they'd been killed, but they came back with their cushions, and that shows that if you have enough food and clothing, you can't find the tail of the plane. Just when things were looking up, they got hit hard. It's late at night and everyone's asleep, but there's a loud noise outside. It was an avalanche. In an instant, the snow filled the cabin. They have no chance to react. They lost 8 more of their teammates to this disaster. They spent the last night together. After dawn, they pulled the victims out of the cabin and mourned. It's now 50 days since they crashed. The snow is fading and the temperature is warming up. They loaded up with food and set off again to find the tail. Before they left, Randall gave his teammate a little red shoe and told him that when the shoes were reunited, that would be the time for them to go home, and then Randall took everyone's expectations with him. He and his teammates set off on their journey. After hours of hiking, they actually found the tail end of the plane. There was plenty of food and clean clothes. It turned out to be only 3 hours away from the cabin. Randall realized that if they went further, they might find a way out, but his teammates didn't want to take any chances. He just wanted to fix the generator. But when it was time to go back the next day, the generator was too heavy for them to take back to the cabin. They had to bring the repairman and the radio here. But after a lot of work, the radio still didn't work. It was almost dark. They had to build a fire and make a plan. Even if Randall wanted to go on, Randall needed to have enough food, so they decided to return to the cabin tomorrow. But the weather in the mountains could change at any time. They were caught in another blizzard, and one of his teammates collapsed. Randall told the other to go first. Otherwise, they might not make it back. And Randall didn't give up. He helped his teammate along the way. Soon the first arrived at the cabin. When they didn't have enough people to come back, they went out to look for them. Luckily, Randall appeared in the snow. He carried his fainted teammate back to the cabin. When Lando returned to the cabin, he found his injured teammate dead. This makes him even more determined to get out. Time flies. They've been trapped for 61 days, but for them, it seems like centuries. Some have given up and don't want to keep eating their companions. Some have lost their minds and just stare out the window. Randall watched. He knew he had to find a way out again, but he couldn't do it alone. So Randall approached Rob and asked him to come along, but Rob thought it would be hard to get through the snowy mountains, and that he should wait until the weather warmed up. But then one of his teammates died of serious injuries. That means they have another meal to eat. Then Randall got down on his knees and begged, "Before we turn into animals." And Rob finally stopped saying no and just went. Randall, Rob, and one other teammate, they packed their lightweight gear and food. They formed an expedition. Those who stayed behind put all their hopes in them. They prayed for a way out. This time, the expedition will cross several peaks. During the day, they'll travel non-stop. At night, they seek shelter from the wind. After days of walking like this, with great difficulty, they climbed to the top of the mountain. But as far as the eye could see, the mountains were still mountains. The disappointment of the long journey had caused a rift between them. Rob had lost his nerve. He proposed to go back. Randall, on the other hand, felt they had to keep going. The only way to save them was to keep going. Then Randall suddenly climbed to the top of the mountain. Then he yelled at Rob to hurry up and see what he'd found. Rob's hope was renewed. He rushed to the top, but before his eyes were snow-covered mountains. He collapsed and fell to the ground. Randall told him that there was a green color on the snowy mountain ahead. Once there, they would be saved, but the mountains looked far away. Rob thinks he can't reach it. Randall argued that there was nothing that couldn't be done. There's nothing that can't be done, just as they've been trapped for 70 days and still managed to make it over the mountains to this place. As Rob listened to these reassuring words, he slowly stood up. He was inspired again. Then he asked Randall if he wasn't afraid to die. Randall said that even if he died, he would die on the journey. Then they made a new plan. They gave most of the food to their companion and sent him back to a closer cabin. And Randall and Rob chose to risk everything to save them from the snowy mountains. Then they headed for hope, supporting each other along the way. I don't know how many days it took. They finally saw the green grass and trees they've been waiting for. These two men were so excited. They went to the lake and took the water. Meanwhile, the cabin was dead silent. They huddled together in a stupor, waiting to die. Suddenly, one of them heard a noise. He thought it was a hallucination and did nothing. Then someone else heard a noise. That's when they were sure it was a helicopter. They stepped out of the wreckage and looked around. Then two helicopters appeared in the distance. They were cheering and celebrating. And on board were Randall and Rob. They made good on their promise. When the little shoes meet again, they'll be saved. After that, The 16 survivors returned to the mountain. They erected a cross at the top of the mountain in honor of the 29 who lost their lives. People are happy to see a miracle, but few can imagine the pain and suffering of the miracle worker. This movie, based on true events, brings us to the scene of the miracle and lets us witness a hellish trial of survival on top of the mountain. Civilized indoctrination and the rules of the game in the civilized world all belong to the category of human civilization, which is created by human beings. Therefore, in the final analysis, in the face of the cold nature, it is the power of human beings and the glory of human nature that opens up a green channel of life for the people on the snowy plains from the wind, snow and ice. At the end of the movie, there is an aerial shot of a huge black cross standing proudly between heaven and earth on the top of a mountain. It is a symbol of mankind's unyielding faith and a monument to the triumph of humanity. It seems to cry out to the firmament people who have created a brilliant civilization on this planet are not so easy to be destroyed.